In motorsports, a pit stop is where a racing vehicle stops in the pits during a race for refueling, new tires, repairs, mechanical adjustments, a driver change, as a penalty, or any combination of the above. Not all of these are allowed in all forms of racing. The pits usually comprise a pit lane which runs parallel to the start-finish straight and is connected at each end to the main track, and a row of garages outside which the work is done. Pit stop work is carried out by anywhere from 5 to 20 mechanics, depending on the series regulations, while the driver often waits in the vehicle. Depending on the circuit, the garage may be located on pit lane or in a separate area. Most North American circuits feature a pit lane with a number of pit stalls and a pit wall that separates the pit lane from the infield, with the garages on a separate road in the infield. In races where there are different series racing together, each series has its own separate garage or are parked in their own area. Circuits in other parts of the world typically have the individual garages open directly onto the pit lane through the team's assigned pit box. In American English, it is common to drop the definite article and just refer to pit road, whereas in British English one would always refer to the pit lane. A further difference is that in British English, the term pit box is universally used, whereas in American English, one would say pit stall. It is important to note that in NASCAR, a pit box is a tool, though there is a definitive term used for them. Where it is permitted, refueling is often an important purpose of a pit stop. Carrying fuel slows down a vehicle and there is often a limit on the size of the fuel tank, so many racers require multiple stops for fuel to complete the race distance in the minimum time. Changing tires is also common to permit the use of softer tires that wear faster but provide more grip, to use tires suitable for wet conditions, or to use a range of tires designated by the rules. Teams will aim for each of their vehicles to pit following a planned schedule, with the number of stops determined by many factors such as fuel capacity, tire lifespan, and the trade-off between time lost in the pits versus time gained on the track due to the benefits of pit stops. Choosing the optimum pit strategy of how many stops to make and when to make them is crucial in having a successful race. It is also important for teams to take competitors' strategies into account when planning pit stops, to avoid being held up behind a competitor where overtaking is difficult or risky. An unscheduled or extended stop, such as for a repair, can be very costly for a driver's chance of success, because while they are stopped for service, competitors remaining on the track are gaining time on them. For this reason, the pit crew often undergo intensive training to perform operations such as tire changes as quickly as possible leading to pit stops. For example, in Formula One, where the car is only stationary for a few seconds for a regular pit stop. In most series, the order of the team's pit boxes is assigned by points standings, race results, or previous qualifying results before the start of the race. In NASCAR and in INDYCAR's Indianapolis 500, typically pit assignments are made after qualifying, with the fastest qualifiers choosing their pit stall first. General strategy. In any racing series that permits scheduled pit stops, pit strategy becomes one of the most important features of the race. This is because a race car traveling at 100 miles per hour will travel approximately 150 feet per second. During a 10-second pit stop, a car's competitors will gain approximately 1/4 mile over the stopped car. However, the car that made the additional pit stop will run faster on the racetrack than cars that did not make the stop, both because it can carry a smaller amount of fuel, and will also have less wear on its tires, providing more traction and allowing higher speeds in the corners. In racing series where teams have their choice of different compound tires, the lower tire wear may be enough to allow the team to choose to use a tire with a softer rubber compound that provides increased grip at the expense of faster wear. Going longer between stops may even cause enough wear on the softer tire to cause the tires to fail. Because of this, race teams plan a pit strategy prior to the start of every race. This is a schedule for each car's planned pit stops during the race, and takes into account factors such as rate of fuel consumption, weight of fuel, cornering speed with each available tire compound, rate of tire wear, the effective tire wear on cornering speed, the length of pit road and the track's pit road speed limit, and even expected changes in weather and lighting conditions. The pit strategy does not just include a schedule of when pit stops will happen, it also includes what service and adjustments are scheduled for each pit stop, particularly in endurance racing, where scheduled changes of wear limited parts such as brake pads may be planned for specific points during the race. The pit strategy is calculated carefully so that the amount of time to be given away to other competitors in pit stops is balanced out by the time gained while on the track, resulting, theoretically, in the shortest possible time to cover the scheduled distance. However, a team's pit strategy is not a fixed, immutable thing. It is subject to change during the race to take into account the unpredictable events that happen in every race. In road racing, for example, if the weather changes from dry to rain, teams will be forced to recalculate their pit strategy based on the unscheduled stop to change from dry weather, slick tires to treaded wet weather tires. Safety car periods often see mass pit stops by many teams, hoping to take advantage of the slowed pace to reduce the ground loss to other teams while making pit stops. This forces teams that do so to immediately recalculate their pit strategy to optimize it for the remaining race distance after the stop. Even when a team chooses not to take advantage of the opportunity to stop during a full course caution, it can still result in significant changes to pit strategy. Under caution, the cars run at a reduced speed that results in greatly reduced tire wear and fuel burn for a distance traveled. Depending on the circumstances, this may be enough for a team to gain more by choosing not to pit, hoping that the reduced fuel burn and tire wear will allow them to make one pit stop fewer than the other teams, allowing them to gain distance and time on their opponents. At tracks noted for frequent full-course cautions, teams may even plan their entire race strategy around this, using a suspension and aerodynamic setup suited to short sprints instead of extended runs to gain positions in the short bursts of green flag racing, and planning their pit strategy on the assumption that cautions will extend their fuel mileage and tire wear enough to make fewer stops than would otherwise be needed to complete the race distance. Services performed. During a scheduled pit stop, the team's pit crew services the vehicle as quickly as possible, completing a number of different services. The most common services performed are refueling and changing tires. Other services performed in routine pit stops include removing debris from radiator air intakes, cleaning the windscreen, and making adjustments to tire pressure, suspension settings, and aerodynamic devices to optimize the vehicle's performance for the current conditions. In endurance racing, scheduled driver changes and brake pad replacements are also considered routine service when done as part of a scheduled pit stop. An unscheduled pit stop may see other services performed, because unscheduled stops are often due to damage or mechanical problems. They may include emergency repairs and replacement of parts. In some forms of racing, a team may be ordered to bring a vehicle into the pits as a penalty and either drive through the pit lane at the maximum permitted speed or remain stationary in their pit box for a specified period of time. During this time, no services can be performed. Formula 1. In Formula 1, mid-race refueling has been banned since 2010, and cars make pit stops with the primary purpose of changing tires. Teams sometimes also make adjustments to the front and rear wings and perform minor repairs, most commonly replacing the nose and front wing assembly. Pit strategies generally call for between 2 and 4 scheduled stops, depending on the circuit. The drives between pit stops are commonly known as stints. When the car is approximately one lap away from making its stop, the team's pit crew will set up fresh tires and all needed pit equipment. Because of the overhead pneumatic rig, the team may have all pit mechanics in position prior to the car's arrival, with the exception of the rear jackman. Interestingly, unlike almost all other forms of racing that feature routine pit stops, Formula One rules limit teams to a single pit crew for the mandatory 2 cars entered. Therefore, teams must stagger their pit schedules so that only one of their 2 cars is in the pits at any given time. Most other racing series that feature routine pit stops permit each car its own pit stall and crew. Refueling was permitted from the 1994 season until the end of the 2009 season. During this period, a pit stop involved about 20 mechanics, with the aim of completing the stop as quickly as possible. Stops generally lasted for 6 to 12 seconds depending on how much fuel is put into the car. However, if there is a problem, such as a fuel pump failing or the engine stalling, or repairs having to be made, it can take much longer. Cars were fueled at a rate of more than 12 liters per second. This was accomplished by a fairly complex closed system that pumped air out of the car's fuel tank as the fuel was being pumped in. As refueling is a potentially hazardous situation, the mechanics wore fire-resistant multi-layer suits and flame-resistant gloves, long underwear, balaclava, socks and shoes, which have to meet the guidelines set by FIA Standard 8856-2000. F1 pit crew roles. The lollipop man holds the team's pit sign, helping the driver identify his pit stall on a possibly crowded pit road. During the stop, he holds the sign in position to remind the driver to keep his brakes on while tires are being changed, and then to remember to put the car in first gear once the jacks are lowered. He also gives the driver the sign to depart his pit stall by raising the sign from in front of the driver. In 2008, Ferrari used a traffic light system to replace the lollipop man. A red light signaled the driver to keep his brakes on, an amber light to put the car in first gear, and a green light to signal the driver to depart his pit stall. After human error caused Felipe Massa to drive off with his fuel hose still attached during the Singapore Grand Prix, Ferrari reverted to the lollipop man system. However, in the 2010 and 2011 seasons, Ferrari reverted to a traffic light system, as did some other teams. The 4 tire changes, one at each corner of the car, have the sole responsibility of using a pneumatic wrench to remove the car's single locking lug nut from each tire, then reinstall it on the new tire. 8 tire carriers are used, 2 at each corner of the car, 1 assigned the task of removing the old tire from the car, and 1 to install the new tire on it. The 2 stable the car at each side of the car in the middle. The front wing men adjust the front wing angle. The front and rear jack men use simple lever-type jacks to lift the car and permit the changing of tires. The job of front jack man is considered the most hazardous, as it requires standing directly in front of the car as it enters its pit stall. By contrast, due to the location of his duties directly behind the car, the rear jackman is the only team member not in his working position before the car enters its pit stall. Some teams even have 2 spare front and rear jackmen for replacement. The fire extinguisher man does not actually work on the car. Instead, he stands ready with a handheld fire extinguisher to try to stop any accidental fires that may occur during a stop, at least long enough for the pit crew and driver to evacuate. This job became standard following Jos Verstappen's 1994 pit fire. The starter man does not normally work on the car. His job is to stand ready with a starter tool to restart the car should the driver stall his engine during the stop.